Sometimes the greatest miracle begins with the one person everyone else is willing to leave behind. The rain came down in slow silver sheets across the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, turning empty roads into shimmering ribbons beneath the glow of tired streetlights. Most people had already found their way home, where warm dinners waited on kitchen tables and familiar voices filled quiet living rooms. Ethan Walker wasn't one of them. His 12-hour shift at Harper Auto Repair had stretched later than usual after an elderly customer couldn't afford the full bill for a transmission repair. Ethan simply smiled, charged her half, and promised himself he'd figure out the missing money later. It wasn't the smartest business decision, but raising 8-year-old Lily had taught him something more valuable than profit. Kindness rarely made life easier, but it always made it worth living. His old Ford F-150 rumbled steadily through the rain as a faded lunchbox rested on the passenger seat beside him, still carrying the peanut butter sandwich he never found time to eat. His thoughts wandered toward home, wondering if Lily had remembered to feed Baxter, the aging golden retriever who insisted on sleeping beside her bed every night since her mother passed away 4 years earlier. The little white farmhouse waiting at the edge of Pine Creek wasn't much to look at. The porch leaned slightly after too many winters. The paint had long surrendered to the weather, and the mailbox refused to stay upright no matter how many times Ethan repaired it. But it was home. It was safe. It was filled with laughter that money could never buy. As he rounded the final curve before the county bridge, his headlights swept across a lonely bus stop almost hidden beneath towering oak trees. At first, he thought the shape near the bench was nothing more than a pile of discarded blankets. Then it moved. Ethan eased off the gas. A young woman sat slumped against one of the wooden posts, soaked by the rain, her shoes abandoned several feet away, as though she had forgotten they even existed. One hand loosely held a small leather purse while the other rested against the bench beside her. Her expensive navy coat was drenched. Her blonde hair clung to her face, and although she appeared disoriented, there was no anger, no fear, only an overwhelming exhaustion that settled over her like the storm itself. Several cars passed without slowing. One SUV briefly tapped its brakes before accelerating into the darkness again. Ethan remained still behind the wheel, watching windshield wipers struggle against the rain. He quietly reminded himself that strangers carried unknown stories, and unknown stories sometimes carried trouble. But then another thought settled deeper inside him. Lily would ask what happened if he drove away. She always did, and he never wanted to become the kind of father who taught his daughter that inconvenience was a reason to ignore another human being. Ethan pulled on his shoulder, stepped into the cold rain, and slowly approached the bench. "Ma'am," he called gently. "Are you all right?" The woman lifted her head, just enough for tired blue eyes to meet his. She tried to answer, but only managed a weak smile before lowering her gaze again. Ethan noticed she wasn't injured. She simply looked completely worn out, as though life itself had become heavier than she could carry. He removed his flannel jacket and carefully draped it across her shoulders. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said softly. She whispered something he couldn't quite hear before allowing him to help her toward the truck. As Ethan opened the passenger door, neither of them noticed 3 black luxury SUVs crossing the bridge less than a mile away, their headlights cutting through the rain as dozens of people searched desperately for the missing daughter of one of America's most powerful billionaire CEOs. The little farmhouse greeted them with a single porch light glowing against the rain like it had been waiting for someone all along. Ethan helped the young woman up the 3 wooden steps as carefully as he would have helped any exhausted traveler. She leaned slightly against the railing, her movements slow and uncertain, but she never complained. Inside, warmth immediately wrapped around them. The smell of chicken soup lingered in the air, mixed with fresh bread that had been baked that afternoon by Lily and slightly overcooked in the tiny oven she insisted on using by herself. Baxter lifted his gray muzzle from the braided rug, wagged his tail once, then quietly walked over to sniff the unfamiliar visitor before deciding she was safe enough to earn another lazy tail wag. The soft sound of small footsteps hurried across the hallway. "Daddy," you're finally home. Lily appeared wearing oversized pajamas covered with tiny blue stars, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit beneath one arm. Her bright green eyes widened as she noticed the woman standing beside her father. "Oh," she whispered, looking first at Ethan and then back to the stranger. "Is she okay?" Ethan smiled gently as he helped the woman sit on the old couch beside the fireplace. "She had a difficult night, sweetheart. I think she just needs someplace warm." Lily nodded with surprising seriousness for an 8-year-old. "Like when Mrs. Henderson got stuck in the snow last winter?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Something like that." Without another question, Lily hurried into the kitchen. A moment later, she returned carrying one of her favorite blankets, the handmade quilt her grandmother had sewn years before. She carefully spread it across the young woman's shoulders. "It is the warmest one we have," she said proudly. The woman looked down at the colorful quilt, then slowly raised her eyes toward Lily. For the first time since Ethan had found her at the bus stop, a genuine smile appeared across her face. It was small and fragile, almost unfamiliar, as though smiling had become something she had forgotten how to do. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was soft, elegant, yet strangely tired. Lily beamed. "I am Lily." The woman hesitated for a brief moment, as though searching for the safest answer. "Claire," she replied quietly. Ethan noticed the pause but chose not to ask why. Everyone deserved the chance to share their story when they were ready. He disappeared into the hallway and returned with one of his clean flannel shirts and a pair of comfortable sweatpants. "The bathroom is down the hall," he said. "Dry clothes might help." Claire accepted them with both hands, her expression carrying the kind of gratitude that needed no explanation. A few minutes later she returned, her damp hair loosely tied back, looking far different from the polished stranger Ethan had first seen beneath the rain. The expensive jewelry was gone. The designer coat rested near the wood stove, drying beside Ethan's work jacket. Dressed in oversized clothes that clearly belonged to someone else, she no longer looked like a woman from another world. She looked like someone who had simply become exhausted from carrying too much for too long. They gathered around the small kitchen table, while bowls of hot soup steamed beneath the warm yellow light hanging overhead. No one rushed the silence. The old clock ticked gently on the wall, while rain tapped against the windows. Claire wrapped both hands around the bowl, quietly absorbing its warmth before taking the first careful spoonful. Her eyes briefly closed. It was only homemade soup, simple bread, and iced tea, yet something about the meal seemed to soften the invisible weight she had carried into the house. Ethan never asked where she came from. Lily never asked why she had been alone. And for the first time in many months, Claire found herself sitting at a table where nobody seemed interested in her name, her status, or what she could offer in return. Outside, the rain continued to fall across western North Carolina, while several miles away, the black SUVs drove past another empty intersection, unaware that the woman they were searching for had already found the one place no amount of money could have predicted. Morning arrived quietly over Pine Creek as pale sunlight filtered through the maple trees surrounding Ethan's little farmhouse. The rain had disappeared, leaving tiny drops clinging to the porch railing like scattered glass. Ethan was already outside before 7 o'clock, tightening the loose chain on Lily's bicycle while Baxter lazily stretched across the front yard. Inside the kitchen, the smell of fresh pancakes drifted through the house. Claire stood silently near the window, holding a warm mug of coffee with both hands. She watched Ethan laughing as Lily raced circles around the mailbox, pretending she was entering the final lap of a championship bicycle race. The simple scene felt strangely unfamiliar. Nobody was checking a schedule. Nobody was answering endless telephone calls. Nobody expected perfection before breakfast. She could not remember the last time she had seen someone smile without expecting something in return. Lily suddenly waved toward the window. "Claire, come outside. Daddy finally fixed my bike." Claire hesitated before stepping onto the porch. The cool mountain air brushed against her face as birds filled the quiet morning with cheerful songs. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Feeling any better?" Claire nodded gently. "Much better. Thank you." Ethan simply returned to adjusting the handlebars. Good. Pancakes should still be warm when we get back inside. The conversation was ordinary. That was what made it extraordinary. Nearly 200 miles away in downtown Charlotte, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The 43rd floor of Harrington Global Headquarters pulsed with urgency as assistants hurried through polished hallways carrying tablets and folders. Conference room screens displayed maps, security footage, and countless unanswered questions. At the head of the long walnut table stood Victoria Harrington. Her tailored navy suit was immaculate, but the exhaustion behind her composed expression could not be hidden. She had built one of the largest technology companies in America through discipline, precision, and impossible standards. Yet none of those achievements mattered this morning. Her daughter had vanished. Any confirmed sightings? Victoria asked calmly. The room remained silent until the head of corporate security cleared his throat. Not yet, ma'am. We have contacted local authorities across 3 states. Hotels, airports, bus terminals, hospitals, and transportation services have all been notified. Another executive carefully slid a folder across the table. The media is beginning to ask questions. Victoria closed her eyes for one brief moment before opening them again. No public announcement. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. Ma'am, one finally said, if we release her. Photograph, someone might recognize her. Victoria slowly shook her head. If the world recognizes Claire before someone recognizes her heart, they will only see the Harrington name. I want my daughter found safely, not turned into tomorrow's headlines. Meanwhile, back in Pine Creek, Ethan loaded his toolbox into the truck before preparing to leave for work. Claire quietly stepped onto the porch beside him. I should probably go, she said softly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before handing her a small piece of paper with the farmhouse telephone number written in blue ink. Only if you have somewhere safe to go. Claire lowered her eyes without answering. The silence told Ethan everything he needed to know. He smiled gently. Then stay another day. Lily would probably be disappointed if she came home from school and found her new friend gone. Claire looked toward the driveway, where Lily was carefully placing a tiny drawing inside Ethan's lunchbox. The picture showed 3 smiling stick figures standing beside the little farmhouse with Baxter sitting proudly between them. Above their heads, she had written in uneven crayon letters, "Everybody deserves a safe place." Claire quietly swallowed the emotion rising inside her chest. She had spent years surrounded by glass towers, private jets, and boardrooms worth billions of dollars. Yet somehow, inside a weathered farmhouse with peeling paint and squeaky floors, she had discovered something wealth had never managed to buy. She still did not realize that before the sun would set again, the search for her would begin moving closer to Pine Creek, and the peaceful life Ethan had worked so hard to protect was about to collide with a world far larger than either of them could imagine. After Lily's school bus disappeared around the bend, the little farmhouse settled into a peaceful rhythm that Claire had never experienced before. Ethan grabbed a ladder from the side of the garage and carried it toward the porch where a loose section of gutter had been rattling through every storm for nearly a month. He glanced toward Claire, who stood quietly watering the tomato plants beside the garden fence. You do not have to. Help, he called with an easy smile. You are supposed to be resting. Claire looked at the rusty ladder, then at the overflowing toolbox sitting in the grass. I have spent too many years sitting in conference rooms, she answered. I would rather do something useful. Ethan laughed softly. Well, I cannot promise this will be exciting. That sounds perfect, she replied. They spent the next hour working side by side beneath a bright Carolina sky. Ethan showed her how to hold the flashlight while he secured loose brackets, and Claire surprised him by quickly learning how to organize screws and tools with careful precision. Neither of them rushed to fill every silence. Birds sang from nearby trees. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh pine across the yard. Somewhere beyond the hills, a church bell echoed through the valley. It was the kind of ordinary morning most people forgot before lunchtime. To Claire, it felt unforgettable. Later they moved to the small vegetable garden behind the house, where Ethan knelt beside a row of tomatoes. These are Lily's responsibility, he explained while pulling a few weeds. She says every tomato deserves encouragement. Claire smiled. Does it work? Ethan shrugged with playful seriousness. I cannot prove it scientifically, but they seem happier than the neighbor's tomatoes. Claire laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised even her. It was light and effortless, untouched by expectation or performance. Ethan looked up for a brief moment, noticing how completely different she seemed from the exhausted woman he had found at the bus stop. Whatever burden she carried had not disappeared, but for a few precious minutes it had loosened its grip. That afternoon, Ethan needed to stop by the hardware store for replacement hinges. Claire insisted on coming along, saying she wanted to stretch her legs. Pine Creek was the kind of town where nearly everyone recognized one another, and strangers were noticed without being questioned. As they walked through the aisles, several neighbors greeted Ethan by name. Mrs. Henderson waved enthusiastically from the paint section. Your little girl brought me fresh muffins yesterday, she said. You are raising a wonderful child. Ethan smiled modestly. She gets the kindness from her mother. Claire quietly watched every conversation. Nobody spoke to Ethan because of status or influence. They spoke because they genuinely respected him. On the drive home, they stopped at Miller's Grocery for milk and bread. Claire reached into the pocket of the borrowed flannel shirt and realized she had nothing with her except a small hair tie. Ethan noticed her expression before she could say anything. Do not worry about it, he said as he paid the cashier. You are my guest. Claire lowered her eyes. You keep helping people without asking what they can give you back. Ethan carried the grocery bags toward the truck before answering. My father used to tell me something when I was Lily's age. He said the easiest way to recognize a good heart is that it helps first and asks questions later. Claire quietly absorbed those words as they drove beneath rows of towering oak trees glowing in the late afternoon sun. She had spent years surrounded by people who measured every relationship by influence, opportunity, or advantage. Ethan seemed to measure life by entirely different standards. As they pulled into the driveway, neither of them noticed a dark luxury sport utility vehicle parked almost half a mile away on a hill overlooking the valley. Inside, a man lowered a pair of binoculars and quietly spoke into his phone. I have located a woman matching her description. Send the team. Do not make any assumptions until we confirm her identity. The following morning began like every other morning in Pine Creek, peaceful enough that even the breeze seemed careful not to disturb it. Ethan had already left for Harper Auto Repair after dropping Lily at school, leaving Claire alone with Baxter, who faithfully followed her from room to room as though he had known her for years instead of days. She folded the blankets, washed the breakfast dishes, and quietly swept the wooden porch, finding an unexpected sense of satisfaction in ordinary tasks that no one applauded. For the first time in years, her calendar was empty, her telephone was silent, and every passing minute belonged only to her. She had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. Just after 10 o'clock, the distant sound of engines drifted through the valley. At first, it seemed like ordinary traffic from the county highway, but the sound grew louder until several black sport utility vehicles slowly turned onto the narrow gravel road leading toward Ethan's farmhouse. Their polished paint reflected the morning sunlight like moving mirrors. Claire froze. Her breathing slowed. She recognized the vehicles immediately, not because of the license plates, but because she had spent most of her adult life watching identical convoys arrive outside office buildings, hotels, and charity events. They had found her. The vehicle stopped several yards from the house without rushing forward. Well-dressed men and women stepped out calmly, each wearing discreet earpieces and dark business attire rather than uniforms. Their movements were controlled, professional, and careful not to alarm anyone nearby. One of them, a gray-haired man in his early 60s, quietly removed his sunglasses before approaching the porch. Miss Harrington, he said gently, we have been looking everywhere for you. Claire remained silent. The man lowered his voice even further. Your mother has not slept since you disappeared. Before Claire could answer, two neighboring residents walking their dogs noticed the unfamiliar convoy and stopped to watch. Within minutes, another pickup truck slowed along the roadside. Then another. Pine Creek was the kind of town where unusual events spread faster than weather reports. Curious eyes gathered from porches, sidewalks, and front yards. Whispered conversations floated through the warm air. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everyone understood something important had arrived. One neighbor quietly asked another, "Who are all these people?" Another replied, "I heard someone important might be staying around here." Claire looked across the growing crowd and suddenly realized what would happen next. If these people continued speaking her family name, Ethan would become part of a story he never asked to join. She stepped down from the porch before the security director could say another word. "Please," she said softly. "Not here." The man nodded respectfully. "Your mother only wants to know that you are safe." Claire glanced back toward the little farmhouse. The porch swing moved gently in the breeze. Lily's colorful flower pots lined the steps exactly as they had the day before. Everything about the place represented peace. She did not want cameras, rumors, or endless questions to destroy it. At that exact moment, Ethan's old pickup appeared at the end of the gravel road much earlier than expected. His supervisor had closed the repair shop for the afternoon after a power outage affected the entire block. Ethan slowed as he noticed the unfamiliar vehicles surrounding his property. He climbed out of the truck, carrying nothing more threatening than a paper sack containing fresh cinnamon rolls he had promised to bring home for Lily after school. Every conversation stopped. Every face turned toward him. Ethan looked first at Claire, then at the visitors, quietly sensing that the story she had never been ready to tell had finally arrived at his front door. Ethan quietly set the paper bag of cinnamon rolls on the hood of his truck before walking toward the porch. His expression remained calm, not because he understood what was happening, but because years of raising Lily had taught him that confusion was never improved by panic. He stopped a few feet from Claire and offered the same gentle smile he always did. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Claire looked into his eyes, and for a brief moment, the peaceful life she had borrowed over the past few days collided with the life she had spent years trying to escape. She took one slow breath before stepping beside him instead of away from him. The movement did not go unnoticed. Every member of the security team watched carefully as Claire stood shoulder to shoulder with the quiet mechanic from Pine Creek. The gray-haired security director spoke respectfully. "Sir, my name is Daniel Brooks. I work for the Harrington family. We have been searching for Miss Claire Harrington for 3 days." Ethan blinked once. "Harrington?" Daniel nodded. "She is the daughter of Victoria Harrington." The name meant very little to Ethan. He rarely followed business news and had never paid attention to financial magazines displayed near grocery store checkout lines. He simply looked toward Claire. "Is it your family?" Claire lowered her head before answering. "Yes." A long silence settled across the front yard. Neighbors exchanged puzzled looks while several people quietly searched the name on their telephones. One by one, expressions of surprise spread across the growing crowd. Someone whispered, "The Harrington family owns one of the largest technology companies in the country." Another quietly added, "That woman is worth billions." Ethan looked back at Claire, but nothing about the way he saw her changed. "You should have told me if people were worried about you," he said gently. Claire's eyes filled with emotion. "I wanted one place where nobody knew who I was." Ethan nodded with quiet understanding. "I suppose you found that." Before anyone could speak again, another black sedan slowly entered the driveway. Unlike the others, this vehicle stopped directly in front of the porch. The driver stepped aside as a graceful woman in her late 50s emerged. Victoria Harrington carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to leading boardrooms filled with powerful executives. Yet today, there was something entirely different in her face. There are no television cameras, no reporters, no carefully prepared speeches. There was only a mother who had spent 3 sleepless nights fearing for her daughter. Claire stared at her in complete silence. Victoria took several careful steps forward before stopping only a few feet away. Neither woman spoke at first. Years of complicated conversations seemed too heavy for simple words. Finally, Victoria's voice broke the silence. "Claire," her daughter quietly answered, "Mom." Victoria's eyes briefly moved toward Ethan. "Were you the one who helped her?" Ethan nodded once. I found her sitting alone during the storm. She looked like she needed somewhere warm. Victoria studied him carefully. Did you know who she was? No. Did you ever ask? Ethan smiled faintly. It did not seem like the most important question. Those simple words seemed to stop time itself. The neighbors grew quiet. Even the security team lowered their eyes. Claire slowly reached for Ethan's hand, not because she needed protection, but because she wanted everyone present to understand one simple truth. He is the only person, she said softly, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes, who never asked about my last name, my family, or what I owned. He only asked if I was cold. A deep stillness settled over the farmhouse. Victoria looked at the weathered porch, the faded flower pots Lily had painted by hand, the old pickup parked beside the barn, and finally at the man standing before her. For the first time in many years, the billionaire chief executive officer realized that the greatest gift her daughter had received had never come from wealth. It had come from the quiet kindness of a single father who believed every stranger deserved a safe place to rest. No one hurried to speak after Claire's words. The afternoon breeze drifted across the porch, gently moving the wind chimes Lily had painted the previous summer. Their soft notes floated through the silence like a quiet reminder that some moments deserve patience instead of interruption. Victoria slowly walked toward the porch steps, her eyes never leaving her daughter. "Come home," she said softly. "Everyone is waiting for you." Claire looked down at the weathered wooden boards beneath her feet before answering. "They are waiting for an executive. They are waiting for the next chief executive officer. I'm not sure anyone has been waiting for me." Victoria lowered her gaze. The sentence landed with far more weight than any boardroom negotiation she had ever faced. For years, she had believed she was preparing Claire to inherit a remarkable company. She had never realized she was also asking her daughter to surrender the ordinary life she secretly longed for. Ethan quietly stepped back, sensing that the conversation belonged to them. He had no desire to stand between a mother and her daughter. Yet before he could move away completely, Claire gently touched his arm. "Please stay," she whispered. "You deserve to know why I ran." Ethan gave a small nod without saying a word. Claire took a slow breath as she faced her mother. 3 nights ago, I was supposed to attend another dinner with investors and board members. Everyone spent hours discussing my future. Not one person asked whether it was the future I wanted. Victoria remained silent. Claire continued, her voice calm but honest. Every decision had already been made. My office, my responsibilities, my public appearances, even the city where I was expected to live. I walked out because I realized I had spent years becoming successful while forgetting how to feel alive. The neighbors who had gathered nearby no longer whispered among themselves. Even those who had arrived out of curiosity now listened with quiet respect. Daniel Brooks removed his glasses and looked toward the mountains, giving the family as much privacy as possible despite the crowd. Claire smiled faintly as she looked toward Ethan's farmhouse. When Ethan found me, he never recognized my last name. Lily never cared how much money my family had. She only wanted to know whether I liked pancakes and if I wanted the warm blanket. Her eyes filled with grateful tears. For 3 days, I woke up without an assistant knocking on my door, without meetings, without headlines, without expectations. I helped fix a gutter. I watered tomatoes. I laughed because a little girl believed vegetables grew better when someone encouraged them. Ethan smiled quietly at the memory. Claire looked directly at her mother. "Do you know what surprised me the most?" Victoria gently shook her head. "Nobody here treated me like someone important." She paused before adding with a grateful smile, "They treated me like someone who mattered." Victoria slowly closed the distance between them. Her eyes glistened as years of carefully controlled emotions finally softened. "I thought giving you every opportunity was the same as giving you every happiness," she admitted. "I see now that I confuse success with peace." Claire reached for her mother's hand. "I never wanted to disappoint you." Victoria squeezed her daughter's fingers gently. "You never did. I simply forgot that my daughter was more precious than the company I built." At that exact moment, the familiar yellow school bus appeared at the end of the gravel road. Lily jumped down the steps, carrying her backpack almost as large as she was. She happily waved before noticing the unfamiliar vehicles and the crowd gathered around her home. She hurried toward the porch, slightly out of breath, then looked at Claire with complete innocence. "Are your family here to take you home?" Claire knelt beside her and smiled warmly. "Maybe," she answered softly. Lily thought for only a second before wrapping her small arms around Claire in a heartfelt hug. "Then I hope they know how nice you are." No one spoke after that. The quiet embrace between a little girl and a woman who had finally remembered who she was said more than any fortune ever could. The crowd gradually began to disperse as the afternoon sun settled lower behind the Blue Ridge Mountains. Neighbors quietly returned to their homes, carrying with them a story they would remember for years, not because a billionaire family had visited Pine Creek, but because they had witnessed something money could not explain. The black sport utility vehicles remained parked along the gravel road, their polished exteriors looking strangely out of place beside Ethan's weathered pickup truck. Victoria stood on the porch for a long moment before turning toward Daniel Brooks. He immediately understood the silent instruction and walked to one of the vehicles. Moments later, he returned carrying a slim leather portfolio. Victoria accepted it without hesitation before facing Ethan. "There is something I would like to do for you," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head before she had even opened the folder. "There is no need." Victoria smiled gently. "Please hear me first." She carefully removed several documents. "This includes enough to pay off your home, create a college fund for Lily, replace your truck, and ensure you never have to worry about another repair bill or mortgage payment again." The breeze lifted the corner of one page as silence settled over the porch once more. Claire watched Ethan carefully, already suspecting what his answer would be. Ethan looked down at the papers for her. Only a brief moment before meeting Victoria's eyes again. His expression remained warm, respectful, and completely unchanged. "That is incredibly generous," he said, "but I cannot accept it." Daniel looked surprised. Even several members of the security team exchanged quiet glances. Victoria spoke again. "You saved my daughter." Ethan smiled softly. "I gave someone a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. That is what any decent person should do." Victoria gently closed the folder. Most people would not have. Ethan glanced toward Lily, who was sitting on the porch steps showing Baxter how to balance a dog biscuit on his nose. He laughed quietly before answering. "That is exactly why I have to raise her to believe they would." Claire felt tears gathering once again. She had spent years surrounded by negotiations where every favor carried a price, and every kindness expected a return. Ethan had quietly refused more money than most people could earn in several lifetimes, without showing the slightest hesitation. Victoria slowly nodded, her respect growing deeper with every passing second. "Then tell me what I can do." Ethan took a thoughtful breath before answering. "If you truly want to thank me, then promise Claire something." Victoria Watif. Ethan continued gently. "Do not ask her to become the person everyone else expects before you remember the person she already is." Claire lowered her eyes as tears rolled freely down her cheeks. Victoria remained completely still. The words were simple, yet they reached a place inside her that years of business success never had. After a long silence, she stepped toward her daughter and carefully held both of Claire's hands. "I cannot change the years behind us," she said softly. "But I can change every decision that comes after today. The company can wait. Investors can wait. Meetings can wait. You are my daughter before you are anyone's successor." Claire embraced her mother without saying another word. It was not a perfect ending to years of misunderstanding, but it was an honest beginning. As the sun dipped lower across the valley, Daniel quietly returned the untouched portfolio to the vehicle. No contracts had been signed. No fortune had changed hands. Yet somehow everyone standing on that little porch understood they had witnessed a far greater exchange. Pride had become humility. Pressure had become understanding. And one ordinary father who believed kindness should never come with conditions had quietly reminded one of the most powerful families in America that the richest inheritance any parent could leave behind was not wealth, but the freedom to become exactly who their child was created to be. 1 year passed with the quiet confidence of seasons that never asked permission to change the world. Spring returned to Pine Creek, painting the hillsides with fresh green leaves and fields of wildflowers that danced beneath warm Carolina sunshine. Ethan's little farmhouse looked much the same as it always had. The porch still creaked beneath familiar footsteps. Lily's flower pots had multiplied, each one painted with cheerful colors that never matched but somehow belonged together. Baxter had grown slower, spending most afternoons sleeping beneath the old maple tree while Lily completed her homework beside him. Some things never needed to become extraordinary to become precious. Ethan was replacing the handle on the garden gate one Saturday afternoon when the distant sound of a single engine drifted up the gravel road. He looked up, expecting another neighbor needing help with a truck or lawnmower. Instead, an older blue pickup slowly rolled into the driveway. There were no black sport utility vehicles, no security team, no photographers, no polished motorcade. The truck came to a gentle stop beside Ethan's weathered Ford. The driver's door opened, and Claire stepped out wearing blue jeans, simple boots, and a light cotton sweater. Her hair moved freely in the breeze, and the confident smile on her face no longer belonged to someone carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. It belonged to someone who had finally chosen her own path. Lily spotted her first. "Claire!" she shouted before racing across the yard with the unstoppable excitement only children possess. Claire laughed as she knelt to welcome the joyful hug. "You got taller," she said. Lily grinned. Proudly. "Daddy says it is because I keep eating vegetables, but I think it is because I keep talking." Ethan laughed quietly. "I think both theories have some evidence." Claire walked toward him, holding a small wooden box wrapped with a simple blue ribbon. "I brought something for your family." Ethan accepted it with curious eyes. Inside rested a handcrafted wind chime made from polished river stones and reclaimed wood. Across the top, burned carefully into the wood by hand, were the words, "Every heart deserves a safe place." Ethan looked up. "You made this?" Claire nodded. "I took a woodworking class after everything changed. It reminded me that creating something with your own hands feels different from signing papers in a boardroom." They hung the wind chime beside the front porch where the afternoon breeze immediately coaxed a soft melody from the polished stones. The gentle sound floated across the yard, blending with birdsong and children's laughter. Claire looked around the farmhouse with quiet gratitude. "My mother still leads the company," she said. "But now she leaves the office early every Friday. We have dinner together every week. Sometimes we even forget to talk about business." Ethan smiled. "That sounds like progress." Claire nodded. "It is." She looked toward Lily, who was teaching Baxter another impossible trick. "And I finally found work that feels like mine. I created a foundation that helps families who need temporary shelter during difficult times. We call it Safe Place." Ethan looked at her with quiet pride. "That sounds exactly like something you were meant to build." Claire's eyes filled with gratitude. "It only exists because one person opened his front door without asking who I was." She took a slow breath before meeting Ethan's eyes. "I came back today because I wanted to ask something." Ethan waited patiently. Claire smiled, the same genuine smile that had first appeared beneath Lily's handmade quilt. "Would it be all right if I kept coming back from time to time? Not as someone's daughter, not as an executive, just as Claire." Ethan looked toward Lily, whose laughter echoed through the valley, then back at the woman whose life had quietly changed alongside his own. His answer came as naturally as the breeze moving through the trees. "This porch has always had room for one more chair." Claire smiled through grateful tears as the wind chime softly echoed above them. Sometimes the greatest miracles never arrived in limousines or private airplanes. Sometimes they arrived as ordinary acts of kindness offered without expectation, quietly transforming strangers into friends, broken hearts into healed ones, and simple houses into places that people would forever call home.